when it comes to actually training staff. Although actually, as I go through it, if you see additional ones, just pop them in the chat box. So some of the barriers that I've seen to training staff, the cost. Um, the provider, the organization doesn't want to either A, pay someone to come in and provide the training, or B, they don't want to have to pay staff extra if they're staying past work hours, or they don't want to have to hire additional staff to come and manage the day hab while these staff go and get trained, right? There's cost involved somewhere along the line. Time. When are we going to do it? Day hab is open from 9 to 4 and staff are bam, 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 going through their schedule all day. And then after that, they're taking people to group home. When am I supposed to give them this training? Also, one training, while it can be really beneficial, may not meet some of the unique needs that you see in your clients. We can provide training on how to, show compassion and understanding to someone with IDD, but that might be different for someone who's medically fragile, right? It might be different from someone who's from a different culture. It might be different from someone who's verbal and able to talk to us about what's going on versus someone who doesn't have the ability to speak, right? And so one training isn't going to teach you how to provide all of the support. But I think the goal is a training can help increase compassion, right? And then another barrier that I've seen, and this is where I think, again, BCB has really come in with their knowledge, is our staff behavior is going to be reinforced or punished. So let's say you have a staff and they notice that little Franklin is crying because his aunt just died. And that staff sits and really takes time, tell me, Franklin, tell me a little bit about what's going on. And they have a conversation. Hold on, because they took time for the conversation, they forgot to clock out. And now that turns into an issue. Or because they had this conversation, who's watching the 4 other clients that staff member is supposed to be watching? Or, oh my gosh, I forgot to give everyone meds on time. And now that's an issue, right? And so sometimes just the way the organization runs, we tend to punish compassion in staff. And I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer to that, but I think some of you might have it, so it'd be great to have more conversations about this. Just looking in the chat.
One question that was asked that I thought was really interesting was, do many of those with disabilities grieve similar to children? In the past, I worked in pediatric hospice.
Yes. That's a good question. So if you're looking at it from a cognitive perspective and understanding death, I would say, okay, so you have, a child understands death in this very minute way, right? They don't have a lot of knowledge of death. If we have a client that has a cognitive level that's similar, we're gonna see the same things, right? So like I mentioned, the client who might repeatedly ask, where's dad, where's dad? They might have a cognitive level of someone who's 4. Which is why we're going to see some of those behaviors similar to a child you would see at 4. So yeah, I think you're right. And so I do think it depends on the person's cognitive abilities. Yeah, that's interesting. Love that question. Okay, briefly, I just want to acknowledge the realities of direct support staff. They have so many responsibilities. They don't always get necessary training. I get frustrated because they don't even they're supposed to, but they don't get lots of great training in trauma. And yet they're working with traumatized individuals like the majority of the time. The reality is they may not get support from upper management, right? We talked about some of the things that they might encounter. Not being able to provide some of these grief support or getting in trouble because they spent too much time with this client and not enough time managing, right? A lot of our staff also come in with a history, right? They come in with their own grief. And to hold space for grief that maybe you haven't dealt with and help someone else who's grieving can be really, really difficult. And then oftentimes, they're not being supported either in their grief. I just think about, there was a client that died at one of the group homes I was at, and nothing was really done for the staff. I think an email was sent out, maybe a text was sent out saying, hey, if you need anything, let me know. but that was it, right? And there were a lot of feelings that staff was having, and there really wasn't a lot there to help support them in that. Um, I hate bringing up money, but money is the reality, right? What are we paying our direct support staff? Not a lot. And so for some of them, I come in, I do my job, and I leave because y'all really aren't paying me what I'm worth. And that's a reality too, right? And this is where we can look bigger, and look more at the organization and how the organization is supporting healthy grief and healthy emotions. So like I mentioned before, our staff even supported in their grief. Is there some sort of a support group? Is there a therapist that's on call? Is there anything, right, available to help me as I'm processing the grief of this client that died? Are there grieving policies at these group homes and day hubs? And so places of work, they have a grieving policy that specifically says, this is how much time, this is how much leave you get. This is how much time you have to process the death that just impacted your life. 3 days, 5 days, that's a whole other issue. A grief policy is going to talk about maybe we can be flexible with the work, right? Maybe we can give a little bit of extra work to this person while you're navigating this. Maybe we let you come in later. Some grieving policies or grief policies will have access to therapy. Yeah, the ones that I have seen in general are not great. The ones that I have seen in day hubs and group homes are even less great. And one thing that we forget is there a grieving policy around a client who has experienced a death loss, not just a staff? So if a staff experiences a death loss, let's say they do get to have a 2-day bereavement leave. Well, what if the client just experienced a death loss? Can they say no to day hub for 2 days, 3 days? I don't know. It's questions to consider and to bring up in some of these places that you're working. This I did in the last CEU, but it talked about kind of how we can look at a continuum of bereavement support. Intervention is that really intensive, grief intense therapy. Not everyone needs this. If you're getting support on these lower tiers, you may not ever need this. What we're doing is we're training staff to have a little bit more literacy and compassion around grief responses so that they won't need more of this up here. I just really want to make it clear that we're not expecting staff to be this. I'm not expecting BCBAs to be this unless you have, training in that area. But providing simple support can really go so far when it comes to helping our clients with IDD through grief. And then one last thing that I want to mention is I kind of want to invite us to think about shifting our mindset a little bit. We have the care focus model that's very much, I care about the person with a disability, so I want to take care of them. That's beautiful, right? Like I care about people with disabilities and I want to make their lives as great as it can be. The problem with the caring focus model is it's already unequal. I'm up here and I'm going to take care of you down here because you can't do it yourself. I'm up here and I'm going to decide how much and how many emotions you can process. I'm up here and I'm going to decide whether or not you go to the funeral. So it's coming from a place of love, right? But we talked about there's a difference between what your intention is and what the actual result is. Often with this caring focus model, we're shielding the person from death. We're not going to go to the funeral. We're going to take away pictures of the person who died. We're going to say lost or went to heaven or went to a better place instead of using the D word. We're not using the word dead. We're going to try to distract them because we don't want them to have difficult feelings, right? And oftentimes with the caring focus model, it's these outside people that decide how much to involve the person in the grieving process and death-related rituals. The person doesn't get to decide that. So I'm wondering if we can shift the mindset to something that's more focused on autonomy, where we're equal and we're talking about it. And I'm giving you information and you're telling me how much you can handle, right? You are the expert on your own grief. You are the expert on how much of this you can do. Um, Giving agency is, I think, one of the best interventions ever. Giving a little bit of agency. When someone feels empowered, when someone feels that they have control, grieving will be easier. It will still be hard, right? But it would be even more hard if there was no control, no autonomy. Um, And then lastly, with this kind of autonomy focused mindset, like I said, we're giving them information. We can tell them about the funeral. We can offer suggestions on how to have a memorial for the person. We can talk about if the death is something that hasn't happened, but it's going to happen, we can provide information beforehand. Um, and the person with a disability can really give a lot of information about how much they want to be involved. I've had clients where the funeral is an option, and I have a schedule that shows you everything that's going to happen at this funeral, and you are able to tell me, I can do this part, but not this part. I can keep it together for this long, but not this long, right? So we're really giving them autonomy in some of these death-related rituals, still involving them. And they don't even have to go, right? If we've given them enough information and they say, no, I don't think I can handle it, that's fine. That's okay. That was your choice. That was not me making that decision for you. Um, yeah. Okay. So these are my references. I would encourage you to go definitely look